Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. Our first story of the day is by Magnus40, Revenge from Beyond the Grave. Well, beyond retirement. This is not my story. This happened at work to one of the older guys who was just about to retire as I was just joining the company. We were intended to overlap only maybe a few months. Luckily for me, I worked with him for a couple of years. I worked for a company making test equipment, mostly in the avionics field. We made a test system for an old inertial navigation system. The IST, Inertial System Tester, basically moves the sensor through all three axes in precise order, speeds, and combinations, and verifies that it reads correctly. The test system was ancient. I mean, really ancient even for the 1980s. It had a magnetic core memory, front panel programming, paper tape loader, and a huge hard disk that was a massive 18 inches metal plate but held about 1 kilobyte. It was all blinking, clicking, and whizzy noises, like a futuristic computer from 60s TV shows. Our hero, who we will call Dave, was the only person in the company who knew how this thing really worked, and he had worked on it for decades. The Air Force was replacing the navigation system with a new one, and so the test systems would be scrapped. Dave had less than 2 years to go before retirement, and so he was on a bit of a shaky peg when the project ended. Dave was also a stereotypical engineer, very good at his job, low social skills, and brutally honest. He had made enemies, but because the company needed him for the IST, and he knew everyone who dealt with the system from our company to the various air bases and air forces, and civilians who used the system, they tolerated his manner. Dave was often called out to bases around the world to help them diagnose a problem. He was very good at his job, and the Air Forces respected him for it. Due to the imminent scrapping of the inertial guidance system, Dave was offered early retirement and took it. As the contract was in its dying days, the project store was emptied of stacks of fanfold paper, paper tape, and other bits of useless rubbish. Due to his connections, Dave knew that the replacement system was delayed by a year, and so the IST service life was going to be extended. Dave knew this before the company did. Dave also knew that some component suppliers who were contracted to support the IST had stopped production and scrapped the old manufacturing kit. This meant that there would be a refurb contract coming to allow the IST to use more modern discs to replace the obsolete dinner plate discs. Dave knew this, but Dave retired anyway. That was the malicious compliance. A few weeks later, a contract request came through requesting that we modify the system tester to use a more modern technology, 1.44 megabyte disks, and support the system for another year with options to renew the contract annually. As it was a simple add-on contract, it was agreed with little oversight. Then the panic set in. Nobody knew how to code the system. It was written in Fortran, and a 1960s version at that, and also some machine code for an ancient processor that nobody had ever used. The majority of us had never seen the spider's web that was magnetic core memory. We didn't know where the source code had been archived, and we didn't have a paper tape punching machine. We eventually found a printout of the source code with some handwritten annotations and had no clue if that was the installed software version or not. Config Control Department did not give a darn about a 60s era system that had remained unchanged for over a decade, and they didn't know much about it. But Dave knew, and Dave was waiting for the phone call to ask. Dave agreed to come back part-time as a contractor at a sphincter-puckeringly high hourly rate for the duration of the contract. The contract was extended another 6 months, sometime after taking Dave almost to his retiral date, but with a huge amount of money in his last 18 months. I liked Dave. He taught me a lot. We eventually found an old tape punching machine in a local newspaper of all places. They used the tape to transfer the article text from the reporter's consoles to the compositing machine. Just for the geeks, we replaced the huge disk with a 1.44 megabyte disk, basically the same as an Amiga, and a single board computer and some custom electronics, all to pretend that it was an ancient slow disk. Basically, we embedded a computer that was several orders of magnitude more powerful than the host system, to pretend to be an ancient slow mechanical drive in a system with a clock rate as slow as a heartbeat. When you think about the logic for Dave, you can't really fault him too much. They gave him a retirement package, so they took it, knowing full well that they're probably still going to be needed and could get extra money. Either way, if they didn't call back for Dave, they'd still have a retirement package. Would you be willing to gamble on taking the retirement package, hoping that they would call you back to pay you even more money to come back? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Happy Sock. I just have to see an ID. You don't have to convince me you're telling the truth. I used to install cable and internet for the local cable company. The company has the same name as a college football team in Ohio, with red as their school color. This is my last job of the day, and it's only a modem swap. I swap out their outdated modem for a new one, copy and paste their Wi-Fi name and password onto the new one, and that's it. The house is massive and in a really nice neighborhood. Get to the door, ring the bell, and the customer's son is there. The dude looks young, so I ask to see an ID, to make sure if he's 18 or older. Company policy, 90% of the time I don't ask if the customer looks old enough. The son gets argumentative right away and starts telling me how he's in college, he's actually 21, and he even has a CCW. And I tell him the policy and that he just looks young and I'm only covering my butt. This isn't good enough. He says hold on and calls his mom, who is the actual account holder and on her way home. I see where he gets his attitude from when he puts his mom on speakerphone and she tells me how she knows the owner of the company, she's only 5 minutes away, and that I'll be sorry if I leave before she gets there. She tells me she made that appointment and made sure someone would be there and that I should just do my job if I like having one. I just say, okay, I'll just get started. I head into the basement and notice that their existing modem also does phone. Their work order, on the other hand, says to replace it with a internet-only modem. So most people that still have a landline for phone only do so for their home security system. And when I remove the phone modem and put in a non-phone modem, you no longer have a security system. By the time the mom gets home, I'm all finished and the son is already connected to the Wi-Fi. I apologize, have her sign the work order, and quickly drive off. Maybe 10 minutes later, dispatch calls me and tells me how the customer has a security system and that they were supposed to get a phone modem and would I go back. Apparently the customer's security system was blaring and wouldn't shut off. I explained the situation and how the work order didn't say anything about a phone modem. She understands and says she will have another tech head over there when someone is free. I gave the tech a heads up and he didn't get over there until late evening. Never heard anything else about it. I never did anything wrong. Stuff like ID checks is so routine. I think it's more than understandable that when multiple people from this family immediately have some snobby attitude and treat OP like they're practically the dirt beneath their feet, that in return, OP's not gonna stick their neck out there for them. OP did exactly what they were supposed to do and got out of there. I'd do the same. Our next story is by Growin' Wolf. No, I don't think I'll change my password. You know how some companies force you to periodically change your password? I hate doing that. I always end up having to write the changed half of my password on my desk so I don't forget it. I understand why they do this. Every time we change our passwords, it reduces the number of people my idiot coworker shared his password with back down to 0. And it means that maybe, just maybe, he isn't reusing it for every random website on the internet. But since I didn't do either of those things, it just annoyed me to no end. So one day I'm asked to build some software for them. Basically, it wired together their VoIP, Voice over IP, aka Internet Phone System, and their instant messaging system. It had two parts, a program that ran on the receptionist's computer and a Windows service. A Windows service is a program that runs on your computer, but you can't see. It just quietly does its work in the background. They do all kinds of things like manage your printers, watch your battery level, maintain your internet connection, etc. Type services in Windows to see what's running on your computer. Some of these run under a computer account, such as local system or network system. Others like mine needed to run as a particular person. At the start of the project, I told them they would have to create a fake user account for my Windows service. Silence was my answer. For testing, I installed my new Windows service under my own name, but I told them it would need to be changed when it went to production. Still no response. On the day we installed it in its final home, my Windows service was still using my username and password. I told them again I needed a dedicated user account just for it. Again, they ignore me. It works reasonably well for a few months, then stops. Nothing works. It can't see people's IM status, it can't dial the phone, the receptionist can't do the job. I walk IT through the process of resetting the password on my Windows service to match my new password. 2 or 3 months go by, then it breaks again. Same problem, same solution. After about the 3rd time, someone checks the box that says my password never expires. Victory? Epilogue. A few years later, the company's bought out and the program I wrote is retired. They never did get around to giving it a dedicated user account, and thus I couldn't change my password even if I wanted to. I think what I love about this story is if OP stopped working there, they would have to keep their login going just because this whole system is still tied into one person's account. You would think it would be a no-brainer just to make a custom account for it, even as far as maybe security's sake. But I guess it was just too inconvenient. And our final story of the day is by RWXWXIA World. New diversity hire manager wanted my dad gone. Oops. My dad, X, was a first-generation Asian immigrant with a PhD who had been working as a senior engineer for a Shell refinery for almost 2 decades. Dad didn't socialize much with his other coworkers, partially because he had a 2-hour round-trip commute, and partially because he just didn't share many of the same cultural touchstones as them, being an immigrant. Still, he was highly respected by his coworkers because he was darn good at his work. Being the stereotypical Asian math whiz, he even came up with his own, extremely complicated, resource allocation algorithm that generated significant efficiency improvements for their refinery. Let's call this the X algorithm. You have to understand, this was a major multi-billion-dollar refinery, so he was now literally saving the refinery millions every year. If he was a more entrepreneurial sort, he probably would have negotiated and gotten either lifetime royalties or promoted into management track. But he was happy with just a rink-a-dink plaque plus his X algorithm making his work much easier for him. He was at the company for 19 years. Over the course of these 19 years, most of his managers either retired or were promoted into senior management outside his orbit. But each time they'd tell the new replacement, "Hey, don't mess with X. He's a good dude and saves the company a ton of money." Dad didn't play the schmoozing game, so he stayed as a senior engineer and never made it into the management track. But he was alright with that. Unfortunately, during the 19th year, there was a 3-month gap between the last manager leaving and the new manager arriving. This time, the message wasn't conveyed. The new manager was, for a lack of a better term, a diversity hire. Unlike the previous supervisors my dad had, she was in her early to mid-20s, fresh out of college with just a bachelor's in management and 0 engineering background. She was now supposed to manage a team of mostly PhDs with decades of experience in the field. To be fair, that probably wasn't easy for her either. She had the typical liberal arts college attitude of always knowing better than you, and heck, I say that as a liberal arts major. And there was immediately friction between her and my dad. She probably just wanted to demonstrate her authority being new, and my dad seemed like an easy target, being the old guy in the department who never hanged out with anyone. It all came to a head one day when she very publicly called him out on some calculations she claimed he got wrong, and offered rather smugly to teach him the math behind it. Oh heck no. Asians in particular tend to care a great deal about face and respect, especially for your elders. Here was this 20-something business management bachelor's with no experience trying to publicly embarrass him, an Asian man in his 60s, and say that she was going to teach him math? Yeah, no. My dad quite brusquely demonstrated that his calculations were in fact correct, and then started doing something I really wouldn't recommend. He seized every opportunity to publicly call her out and embarrass her when she got her stuff wrong, which was quite often. Things got bad. Real bad. The new manager wasn't going to take this lying down. So every week she tried to seize any excuse to write my dad up for purported mistakes or infractions. This went on for a full year. He had gotten an outstanding rating on every annual report since 1995. The new manager tried to give him a not adequate rating on the 2014 one and basically threatened to fire him 1 year short of his 20-year retirement with pension, unless he wrote a self-critique and came up with a self-improvement plan. That was the absolute last straw. My old man had lived through the Cultural Revolution in China, which was all about stupid teenagers and college kids harassing and humiliating their elders and making them write self-confessions and self-criticisms. He wasn't going to put up with this crap, so he said screw it and gave HR his 1 month's notice. You want me gone? I'm gone. Forget you and your pension. The first day, all was quiet. The next day, all heck broke loose. While none of us were there, this is how we imagine things went down. The new manager says X has decided to quit instead of improve his performance. Senior management says, oh, okay. Wait, so who's going to run the X algorithm? New manager says, X algorithm? Senior management says, oh god, oh god, oh god. Senior management basically realized that no one besides him even knew how it worked, much less would be able to maintain or operate it. He had created it all from scratch. Once Dad was gone, the algorithm would be gone with it, along with millions in efficiency savings each year. The head of HR and a VP level exec immediately scheduled a conference with him and the new supervisor, and the company caved all the way. Dad no longer had to report to the new manager. His annual report was changed to outstanding, and he now reported directly to the VP. His job also changed. His only responsibility for the next year, until his retirement date, was to spend a few months in training his replacement on the usage and maintenance of the algorithm. Once his replacement was fully trained, he had no other responsibilities. He could just sit at home and collect his paycheck until his retirement date came. I'd love to say that the new hire was punished for that year of heck, but that probably wasn't the case. I also wish that Pops would have demanded for more for the future usage of the algorithm, but that year of constant fighting had banged him up mentally as well. It's good in a way that in the end, the company did stand up for them and bring them back and give them some kind of beneficial end to their employment there. That said, over these decades, OP's father saved them countless millions of dollars. That company is probably laughing all the way to the bank with how much they took advantage of OP's father. So I kind of feel with OP when they mention that they wish they had asked for more. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.